been in my life so long, I can't remember anything else.
On Earth, everyone can hear you scream.
This was the original tagline for Alien 3 before a script was even written, with an early idea being to set the film on Earth. This is an early indication of the issues with this film's production, as 20th Century Fox had greenlit the project and committed to a release date well before any scripts were even locked in. This created a race against time to make a film purely to capitalise on the success of the previous two. If you thought that Aliens had a troubled production, Alien 3 was on another level, which is a fascinating story on its own. Once story ideas were being worked on, one idea by William Gibson was to focus the film around Hicks being the main protagonist on a space station called Anchor Point, where he and a repaired Bishop would battle xenomorphs, and set up a fourth film reintroducing Ripley, with Renny Harlin set to direct. Fox weren't happy with this concept, as it was deemed to be too similar to Aliens, and Harland also wanted to take the story in a different direction, but still keeping some elements of this script. However, further changes were made to the script to the point where Renny Harlin decided to leave the project because he just wasn't going to make the film that he wanted to make. Seems to be a little bit of a theme with this film. Fox then hired Vincent Ward to pen a script with the possibility of him directing. Ward's version of Alien 3 would be set on a wooden space station and be inhabited by monks with very little technology. Some of these concepts remained in the finished film with some tweaks and adjustments. Fox didn't like the direction that Ward's script was going in, and producers David Giler and Walter Hill then started to write their own script, further adapting some of Ward's ideas. Vincent Ward also left the project, but still has a writer's credit on the finished film because some elements of his script remained. Then a young director of TV ads and music videos came in, David Fincher.
Is it an intro? What I'm saying is it...
Hey, Finchy!
Fincher also didn't like some of the aspects of Ward's script, mainly the wooden planet idea, and was on board with Giler and Hill's change to a prison planet inhabited by hardened criminals that were left to their own devices by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. However, Fincher clashed with the producers about the direction that he wanted to take the film in, as it was clear that he was hired purely to deliver what they demanded of him, instead of him crafting a film in his own vision and working with the writers to realise this.
They're all such a bunch of morons.
Sigourney Weaver was also not enthusiastic about returning, as she was at the time suing Fox for unpaid royalties from Aliens. This was eventually settled, and she obviously did return as Ripley, but with some stipulations of her own. One of the biggest was that there were to be no guns and wouldn't be a straight-up action akin to the previous film. David Fincher was under immense pressure to shoot scenes when the script was constantly being rewritten on a daily basis. Fincher was at odds with the producers so much that he ended up defying their instructions and filming specific scenes that they had rejected, one of which was the famous scene where the alien closes in on Ripley in the infirmary. This actually ended up forming part of the marketing, so it was clear that Fincher knew exactly what he was doing. Fincher was reportedly fired from the film 3 times before finally quitting and his final cut being rejected. He stated that no one hates the film more than he does, and he's disowned the film, refusing to discuss it in interviews. He even tried to have his name removed and replaced with an alias, like Alan Smithy. Fincher also didn't return to provide the director's cut of the film for the DVD release, but the longer assembly cut is said to be closer to Fincher's original cut. To be honest, I've only really scratched the surface here, and there are much more in-depth videos available on YouTube if you want to learn more, but what of the film itself? There are 2 versions of this film, the theatrical cut and the assembly cut, both of which tell the same story, start and end pretty much the same way, but the assembly cut certainly adds many more elements that further fleshes out the story with additional subplots that I do feel are a vast improvement on the original version. This is most notable with Paul McGann's character, Golic. His character is expanded upon in the assembly cut, with a subplot where everybody believes him to be the one responsible for the deaths of his fellow inmates. This is played upon with the additional scene where he's found covered in Boggs' blood after he's been killed by the alien. He's made to look more incriminating. Because he witnesses the alien killing firsthand without being killed himself, he believes that he has some kind of connection with it, labeling it as magnificent after it kills and takes Clements. In the assembly cut, the alien is successfully trapped in a nuclear waste dump. There is a whole extended sequence here with the fire that claims the lives of a few inmates. It also includes the death of Junior, who lures the xenomorph into the dump, allowing Ripley to trap it. In the original release, these characters simply disappear from the film. There's also an additional scene where Golic escapes the infirmary and goes to the tank to set what he calls the dragon free, killing Arthur before doing so. Golic enters asking the xenomorph what he wants him to do next, implying that Golic believes himself to be its servant. The alien runs out and we don't see Golic again, believing him to have been killed by the xenomorph. Before this, there is a scene in the assembly cut with Aaron and Ripley sending a message to the company informing them that they have trapped a xenomorph and request permission to kill it. They reply instantly, demanding that it is left unharmed. This confirms Ripley's suspicions that the company wants the alien and everyone else is expendable. This is a further expansion of the subplot that was present in the previous two films. In the original cut, this is only implied at the very end before Ripley sacrifices herself, and in turn kills the queen alien that she has gestated within herself. When going back to watch this film, I actually do favour the assembly cut for these reasons. This version gives us much more with the inmates, better rounding out some of the characters, and giving the audience a more in-depth look into this society. One element that I didn't like was the use of an ox for the alien's host. In the original release, the host is a dog, which just makes a lot more sense to me. Murphy finds his dog Spike in his room with injuries on his face that were caused by the facehugger. This is entirely different in the assembly cut, with this sequence removed. The fact that it was an ox in the assembly cut means that there was no previous reference to a dog, and it's not overly clear who Murphy is referring to in the air duct just before he's attacked by the alien. From seeing the original cut, it's obvious that it is his dog, but I find that the dialogue doesn't really tally up in the assembly cut. The alien also moves like a dog during the course of the film, and it is an interesting element that a xenomorph would take on characteristics of its host. The ox just doesn't really work in my opinion, but this is only a minor nitpick. I have to admit that I actually do like this film. I mean, it is obvious that this is the weakest of the first three films, but I would actually say that it is still better than Alien Resurrection. I'd even go as far to say that I much prefer this film to Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and even Alien Romulus. The point I made in my Alien review when talking about Alien Romulus was how quick the facehugger gestation to chest burster was in that film. In Alien 3, Ripley has an alien, albeit a queen, gestated within her throughout the film, which also creates a race against time. This was one of many issues that I had with Alien Romulus. Alien 3 is a dark, drab film with very little hope, and that isn't always a bad thing in my opinion. If anything, this tone only adds to the horror. This film is more like the first film than the second with its tone, but does offer something a little bit different. The setting, for one thing, with this being set on a prison colony that is also an industrial complex. The environment is somewhat inhospitable, not only with the planet itself, but also with its inhabitants. Ripley is a target for some of the inmates as they've not seen a woman in years. This is something that plays into the story. She's not only helping them to fight off an alien monster, but she's also got to watch her own back from the monsters within this community. The development of the alien species, where their characteristics are defined by the host species, is also a very good element that was introduced in this film, and I feel that this really wasn't made the most out of in future films in the series. Another aspect of this film that I didn't really care for was the killing off of Hicks and Newt in the opening scene. This just seems to step all over the previous film, making everything Ripley went through with saving Newt come to nothing. It means that Ripley has nothing to live for, which could work both for and against in this film, but my personal feeling is that they really did miss an opportunity to build upon her relationship with Newt and even with Hicks. Ripley could have still have died at the end, but she could have sacrificed herself to save Newt and maybe Hicks too. Michael Biehn was also not happy with this decision and denied the production to use his likeness for a dummy. It did allow for his photo to be used that netted him around the same amount of money that he got for appearing in Aliens, and to be honest, it wasn't actually a really good photo, so he did well there. I do think that this film has its place within the Alien saga, and I believe that although it could have been way better, it's still a film worth watching. There are some excellent moments of horror and gore, and the alien itself looks incredibly creepy, with H.R. Giger returning to design it for this film. The performances are also very good, with nobody hamming it up. The cast are all pretty intimidating in their own way, and it does allow the viewer to think, why are these individuals here? What did they do to deserve this? And that adds another small element to the world building. I do like Alien 3 for what it is. It certainly has that unnerving atmosphere like the first, and there are some really good gruesome moments. I did like that this film also brings an end to Ripley's story, until Alien Resurrection came along.
Fuck.
But it certainly has its issues, and there are many who simply just don't like this film, and I can understand why. I guess it is a bit of an acquired taste. I mean, David Fincher didn't end up doing too badly after this film. He is a master filmmaker, and he's one of those directors who catches my eye every time I see that he's got a new project on the horizon, and I would say that Alien 3 is very much a Fincher film with its atmosphere. I would actually recommend the assembly cut to anybody who hasn't seen it, and I'd also say that I don't believe this to be as bad a film as people say it is. It follows two excellent films, and it is difficult to go in a much more different direction that Aliens took from Alien. I mean, what could they have done differently? Made it a comedy? After the action-focused second film, going back to a more slasher-type horror with a different setting was possibly a sensible move. Diverging too far from the original and/or second film may have been a step too far, and Alien 3 is what it needed to be as a dark, dreary, grimy horror, adds a little bit more to the lore without, once again, answering all of the questions from the first film, until Prometheus came along and ruined it. For me, it is the third best Alien film. But what are your thoughts on Alien 3? Feel free to let us know in the comments. Many thanks for watching this review, and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I've been Colin from the Critical Cinema Club, signing off.